method. So this is my student.h. This is now version 9, only one to go. In version 9, in my header file, student.h, notice that I've not only declared init with name, but I've also declared student with name. So student with name is again named in a manner consistent with the idea of convenience methods. The convention is almost always if the purpose of this class is to return a student or an array, call the convenience method student or array with something so that it sort of does what it says. Notice the plus is important, the ID is important so that it returns a pointer of some sort. And in the M file, here's what I actually do. I take care of the alloc by calling student alloc, then calling my own method init with name and age, which we had before. So otherwise, example 9 is quite like 8. But I've added or stolen this idea of a convenience method from the array class. And lastly, in version 10, we now have this capability. In version 10, I finally realized, you know what, this is stupid. I have declared this prototype atop my file for greet in like 9 previous examples, just so that I could pass in a student and then have that function greet say hello Bob or hello Alice. This is a perfect opportunity to just put this functionality inside the class itself so that I can literally send a message to the object and say, tell me your name. And then the object will say Alice or Bob. So this is a perfect example of a good opportunity for encapsulation. What I really want to do is this: Alice greet, Bob greet, and that message that I send should trigger the printing, the saying of Alice's or Bob's name. So how to implement this? Well, in student.h, I simply have to promise to implement an instance method that returns void. It's just going to use nslog, which is not useful in the real world, but for today it's useful. Greet doesn't take any arguments. And then what am I going to do? Well, the only trickery is in accessing the object's name, but this too is relatively straightforward. In my .m file, I copy the method's signature. I call nslog, hello, I am such and such, I am d years old, and then over here, I simply pass in the name of the instance variable and for age and for name. Alternatively, I could have written this in slightly different form. How else could I have expressed give me your name, give me your age in this comma-separated list of placeholders? Could say self.name, self.age. Which is better? Kind of depends. So on the one hand, it would be it's better to do it this way with the instance variables. Why, do you think? What's that? Yeah. You avoid a method call, right? I don't know how expensive a method call is, but it's got to be more expensive than just going directly to the memory location and getting the address. So that might be a plus, especially if we're calling greet in a tight loop all day long. A downside, though, of this approach is what? In other words, why might we instead want to go with self.name or self.age or even self-space age and self-space name as in this syntax here? Yeah, Zach. Exactly. Maybe there's some error checking code in there that's super important to make sure it gets called so that I don't accidentally say, hi, I'm quote unquote. I at least wanted to say, hi, I'm John or something silly like that. So if you want to leverage your own built-in protection mechanisms that are more than just getting a value, you might want to invoke the property or the getter explicitly itself. So which is best? It really depends. Just make sure this is a conscious decision that you've made. And I will say throughout Apple's code, even though there's a bit of overhead in calling the method, Apple is increasingly just call the property, like just avoid making potential mistakes. So that would not be bad form to just say self.name, self.age. Certainly as frankly, phones get faster and faster, quibbling over how you access a property is really not all that interesting an argument anymore. Questions? Yeah?
So now that you're encapsulating the method of greet,
okay. You can. So what about fast enumeration and greet? You can. So because students is already an array, fast enumeration it refers to the process of iteratively grabbing the next student in the object. It's kind of independent of the idea of greet. So you could still use fast enumeration, and then inside the loop just say open bracket, close bracket, s space greet. So you would use this syntax inside of the tight loop.
And the s would be changing as you go.
Exactly. So fast enumeration only refers to, in this context, the updating of that pointer has nothing to do with what's inside the curly braces of the for loop. So where we're going, not to, well, this will get you excited. After break, we will make our own ATM that looks a little something like this, that allows you to deposit money and see your balance and do arithmetic. And it will allow us to have a conversation about how to actually wire up applications slightly slowly, that it will look like this, your very first actual iPhone app. So let's take our 5-minute break here. All right, so now we actually start to dive into the IDE of Xcode and actually making some applications using UIKit and the various user interface widgets that come with it. There's going to be a little bit more new jargon. So again, as before, just honestly, interject if you have any questions, confusions, if I go too fast or too slow. And what I'll do is try to give you a bit of a tour of one or more of the templates, which are interesting in that they are most likely going to be your own starting point, but useful to tease apart verbally so that you understand exactly what has been wired up for you, so that you know how all the magic is working. So with that said, and then we'll conclude with the ATM example by doing that a little more manually. So if I load up Xcode and create a new project, recall that you get this interface here. Just be careful not to accidentally start with a macOS application, because it will look very different. You want something from under iOS. Almost always it will be application category. Here are the various templates of rapid verbal tour. Master detail application typically has some kind of hierarchy, like a list of options. You click on it, slides to the left or so forth. In the iPad might look like the mail application if you've used an iPad. OpenGL game is a very sexy graphical game, assuming you write it to be sexy. A page-based application is sort of like iBooks, where you can side scroll and it kind of peels over to reveal the next page. Single view application is pretty boring. It's just a single rectangle, and it's up to you to populate it. That's what we'll use, for instance, for the ATM. And it's also a very useful starting point because it's a clean slate, very little magic pre-wired for you. Tabbed application has the tabs at the bottom of the screen that change what the UI is. Utility application is one of these things where you push a button and the UI flips around and shows some settings, usually on the background, and then flips back around. If you have an iPhone, it's like the weather app or the stock application. And then empty application really does nothing for you, almost to a fault now. So typically you want to start with at least single view application or similar. Yeah?
Can you combine features with multiple templates in one application?
Oh, absolutely. You can combine all of these features. These are not mutually exclusive. They are just boilerplate code that you can then add to, subtract from. It's just meant to get you started a little more easily. And these two are a moving target. They've changed significantly since the last version of Xcode. So again, buyer beware with older textbooks or online resources. So let me choose single view application. Click Next. I'm going to give it a name of Demo. Recall that company identifier can be anything. Just choose something unique. It can be edu.harvard or whatnot. Class prefix we'll leave alone. Device family. I'll generally just talk about iPhones because, frankly, it just fits a little more nicely on the screen. But everything we talk about can equally apply to iPads. And as I said, you can make multiple views so that your device is universal and that it works on both. Storyboards we'll come back to, but they refer to this idea of dragging and dropping and drawing a picture and then adding code to dictate how X transitions to Y. Use ARC, automatic reference counting. Do this. This will automatically do memory management for you now. Again, in a couple weeks, we'll tease apart what this really means and why it's now a good thing in general. And unit tests will also come back to this idea of being able to test your code in small bytes. So the only one for now that you should really check is ARC. All right, so I'm going to click Next. Again, I can check Git repository if you want to do version control, so I'll go ahead and do that. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and save this demo folder on my desktop. So I'm going to click Create, and voila, now I have the template. So as you begin, I would encourage you initially at least hide as much stuff as you can. So at the top right, there's all these icons that let you hide things. Just minimize distractions, because frankly, even this is still a little overwhelming at first glance. But let me go ahead and zoom in at top left. And here are the files and groups that we have by default. So let's pluck off the easy ones first that we can ignore. Toward the bottom is products, which is a group. It's a folder that contains nothing at the moment. It's red because my app doesn't exist. I haven't compiled it, but it's going to end up there. Doesn't matter that it's there. It's going to be automatically transferred to the iPhone. You don't have to double click it or the like. Frameworks. This is similar. This is like the linker flag in GCC -L, so that you can link against these various frameworks. You still have to do import at the top of the file, but that just includes the header file. This allows you to link against those files. So if you get adventurous, especially for Project 3, and want to use maps or video or other fundamental libraries, frameworks in the iOS SDK, SDK, you might have to right-click on frameworks and add other frameworks there. Otherwise, you'll get compilation errors if it just doesn't know what you mean by UI map kit to do some Google Map type thing. All right, supporting files. Let's also nix some of these as uninteresting. A plist is a property list. This is a whole collection of key value pairs. Underneath the hood, it's an XML file. But this is like settings for your application. For now, the defaults are fine. But among the things you can change here are like, what do you want? Do you want the clock to show or not? Do you want what orientations do you want to support sometimes?